This is Dr. John Tolson, and you're listening to the Disciple Making Podcast. The last words Jesus uttered come from Matthew chapter 28, and we're going to begin here at verse number 18. Then Jesus came to them, to the disciples, the 12 disciples, and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations." He assumed the going, but the command, the imperative was, go make disciples. So we're talking about what in the world does it mean to make disciples. And let me just say it again, and I'm going to say it every time, probably through May as we go through this series on making disciple makers. Jesus has given us a plan to change the planet. The problem is we have not taken his plan seriously and actually used it as he has asked us to in making disciple makers. There may be a handful of churches in America that are actually doing what Jesus has said to do in terms of making disciple makers. Listen to this for a second. A couple thoughts. Physical infertility can be a painful journey for married couples. Infertility in faith, the faith realm, is unthinkable to Jesus. We were born to reproduce. We were born again, I should say, John chapter 3, to reproduce. So today, I want to take a look at just one aspect, a further aspect of disciple making. And what we're going to look at is a definition of a disciple and a disciple maker. So the passage I want to read comes from 2 Timothy chapter number 2, verse 2, a very familiar verse to many. And here's Paul, the Apostle Paul, and he is trying to galvanize the faith of his young disciple, Timothy. Timothy, scholars say maybe 16, 17, 18 years old at this point, but he has enormous responsibility for other followers of Christ and their maturing process. So this is what Paul said to Timothy. "And the things which you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, these entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." So if we were doing this in a seminar format, I would ask you to read through that verse, underline or circle the most prominent or important words that jump out to you, and maybe just make a note by each one of those words what you think they mean. But I'll do that for you because of our limited time. "The things which you've heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, these entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." It's obvious here that there is to be an ongoing passing on of the basics of the faith. So let's look at this. What are the things? I think the things are talking about the content of the faith. And then he says, which you have heard. So in order to hear something, somebody has to speak, and then somebody has to receive it or listen. So here is someone who is faithfully passing along the content of faith. Paul passing it along to Timothy. Then he says, in the presence of many witnesses. What's that talking about? What he's saying is these things, the content of the faith, can be verified. They can be verified because there are people who heard them. There are people who have passed them on. There are people who have thought them through, even memorized these things. And so it verifies the truthfulness of the truth of Scripture. Then he uses another word here, the word entrust. And the word entrust basically comes from the banking world. And if you want to translate it, it basically can be translated to make a deposit. So he's saying here, these things that have been heard in the presence of many witnesses, entrust them, make a deposit to faithful men, or I would say faithful women, who will be able to teach others also. And so, able to teach others also, able in varieties of ways to pass along that truth. So what does that imply then about the definition or how you would define disciple making? Let me give you three quick things. Number one, it implies a personal growing. And what that means is a growing love for Christ and a growing obedience to his word, to actually Be serious about looking at it, reading it, studying it, and attempting by God's grace to do what it says to do. So that's the first step. The second step in disciple making is helping or enabling others to do what? To have a growing love for Christ and a growing obedience to His Word. So in other words, the very things that are going on in my own development, my growing love for Christ and my growing obedience to His Word, that's what I want to impart in essence to other believers who want to become disciple makers. And then the final step is equipping others. It's a growing love for those people that you are discipling to help them love Christ more and obey His Word more, but then adding a step, and that is to help them to help somebody else come to know Christ. In other words, helping a non-believer understand who Jesus is, what He did, why He did it, why they need it, and how they can get it, how to come to faith. So all that is to say this: the natural outcome of a growing love for Jesus Christ and obedience to His Word is spiritual reproduction. So here's my question to you today. Are you engaged in spiritual reproduction? If you are loving Christ in a growing, maturing way by obeying His truth, the natural outcome of that will be becoming a maturing, reproducing disciple maker. You think about that. Thanks for listening to the Disciple Making Podcast. Check out our website at thetolsongroup.com and sign up for my weekly encouraging videos called Red Glasses Talks to come to your email every Monday morning. You can also find me at Dr. John Tolson on social media. I'd appreciate it if you'd leave me a review and share with a friend.